Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now and like the video.
Right now, millions of people are frozen in front of their screens. In Manila, families are huddled around televisions at 3 in the morning, refusing to sleep. In Toronto, fans are blowing up group chats with all-caps messages that nobody has time to reply to. In Dubai, in Los Angeles, in cities across the world where Filipino communities have built their lives far from home, phones are lighting up with one name after another. Eala, Mboko, Roland Garros, the score nobody predicted. Because what just happened on the clay courts of Paris was not supposed to happen, not according to the bookmakers, not according to the commentators who had already begun drafting their narratives about the favored team's smooth path through the draw, not according to the analysts who had reviewed the rankings, the experience gap, and the Olympic pedigree on the other side of the net and concluded, almost unanimously, that this match was going to be over quickly. And certainly not according to the sections of the Philippine media that had gently warned its own fans just days before the match not to get their hopes up too high. Every single one of those predictions just got shredded on the court where tennis legends are made. Alexandra Eala and Victoria Mboko, a first-time doubles partnership, two young players still in the early chapters of what could become extraordinary careers, walked on to one of the most intimidating surfaces in the sport and defeated an Olympic silver medalist. Let that settle for a moment. Not a journeywoman, not a player coasting through the twilight of a career, an Olympic silver medalist, a proven winner at the absolute highest level of the game, competing on the very same clay, inside the very same Paris complex, in the very same city where that medal had been earned not even a year ago. The tennis world did not see this coming, but some people did. And for those fans who have been watching Eala and Mboko long before this moment arrived, tonight does not feel like a shock. It feels like confirmation of something they have been trying to tell everyone for months. To understand why this upset hit as hard as it did, you have to go back to the week before the match was even played, because the road to this moment was not smooth. It was not built on momentum or confidence or a string of recent victories that had the tennis world buzzing. Both players arrived in Paris carrying the weight of fresh disappointment, the kind of setback that can quietly hollow out a young competitor's belief if they let it. Alexandra Eala's singles campaign at Roland Garros had ended in straight sets, clean, direct, no second-set drama to soften the blow. She walked off that court having given everything she had, and it simply had not been enough on that day. For a player of her age and profile, that kind of early exit at a Grand Slam can be mentally devastating. The cameras move on, the commentators move on, and suddenly you are invisible again inside a tournament that is still very much alive around you. Victoria Mboko had her own wound to carry. The Strasbourg final had been right there, close enough to touch, and then Emma Navarro had taken it away. For a player who had already made such a remarkable and rapid climb through the professional ranks, losing a final when you were that close to the title is a particular kind of pain. It sits differently than a routine defeat. It reminds you exactly how thin the line is between the story you wanted to tell and the one you have to live with instead. So when the Roland Garros doubles draw was released and these two names appeared together for the first time at a WTA main draw event, the reaction inside the tennis world was not excitement. It was not fear or anticipation or the kind of nervous energy that surrounds a dangerous new team. The reaction, if we're being completely honest, was closer to sympathy. Two talented young players, both still licking their wounds from the singles draws, thrown together in a first-time partnership, facing an experienced and proven team in the very first round. It felt, to most observers, like a gentle mercy match before both players focused on what came next. The team waiting across the net was no ordinary obstacle. Leylah Fernandez and Diana Schneider arrived at Roland Garros carrying credentials that demand genuine respect from anyone who follows the sport seriously. Fernandez is not simply a capable doubles player who happens to be Canadian. She is a former US Open finalist. She is the young woman who, across 2 unforgettable weeks in New York, dismantled multiple top players in succession and came within touching distance of a Grand Slam singles title. That kind of mental makeup does not disappear when you cross over into doubles competition. And then there was Diana Schneider, the 2024 Paris Olympic silver medalist in women's doubles. That detail matters enormously, and not just for the prestige it carries. The significance is geographic and psychological. Schneider had already proven on this exact surface, inside this exact complex, in this exact city, that she could compete for the highest prizes in doubles tennis under the most pressurized conditions imaginable. The Olympics do not simply test skill, they test nerve, composure, and the ability to perform when the entire weight of a nation and a moment rests on every single point. So, when analysts looked at the draw and assessed both teams, the conclusion was not difficult to reach. On one side, experience, chemistry built over time, an Olympic medal, a Grand Slam final appearance, and the kind of professional confidence that comes from having been tested at the very top of the sport. On the other side, a first-time partnership, 2 players recovering from recent singles defeats, and a ranking gap that the numbers made impossible to ignore. The experts did not simply favor Fernandez and Schneider, they dismissed the other side entirely. But here is what those experts missed, and this is the detail that changes everything about how you read this story. Alexandra Eala and Victoria Mboko had never been strangers to each other. Long before the Roland Garros draw paired them as partners, before they had ever stood on the same side of a net together, these two had already shared a history that scouting reports and ranking algorithms simply cannot capture. Cast your mind back to the 2022 US Open Girls Tournament. 2 junior tennis players, both still establishing themselves in the sport, both carrying the kind of raw ambition that has not yet been worn smooth by the professional grind. They faced each other in the semi-finals. It was the kind of match that reveals character, because junior Grand Slam semi-finals are not played in front of empty seats and polite applause. There is real pressure in those moments, real stakes, and both players showed exactly who they were under that pressure. Eala came through that match and went on to lift the Junior Championship trophy. It was the kind of victory that announces a player to the broader tennis world, the moment when scouts and coaches and fans who had been watching carefully from the sidelines begin saying the name with a different kind of weight behind it. But what happened after that match, in the years that followed, is the part of the story that the narrative machine missed completely. The rivalry did not calcify into the cool professional distance that sometimes develops between competitors who meet at pivotal moments. Instead, quietly and gradually, it evolved into something else entirely. Mutual respect first, then genuine friendship, then the kind of natural, instinctive chemistry that usually takes doubles partnerships years of shared court time to develop. When the draw paired them together at Roland Garros, the tennis world saw 2 players meeting for the first time as partners. What it did not see was 2 people who had been building toward this moment through years of knowing each other deeply, understanding each other's rhythms, and trusting each other in ways that scouting reports never measure. That trust was about to become visible to everyone. From the very first game, something felt wrong if you were on the side that was supposed to win easily, because the partnership between Eala and Mboko did not look like a hastily assembled first-time pairing finding its feet under match pressure. It looked practiced, it looked intuitive, it looked, frankly, like a team that had been playing together for much longer than the draw sheet suggested. Eala settled into the deuce court with a composure that was remarkable given everything she had absorbed over the preceding days. Her recent clay court performances in Rome had sharpened her instincts on the surface, and at the net she moved with a calm authority that made her look like the most settled player on the court, despite being one of the youngest. That is an unusual quality. Most young players, when thrown into a high-stakes situation, show it somewhere, in the eyes, in the footwork, in the split-second hesitation before a big shot. Eala showed none of it. Mboko brought something entirely different to the equation. Her rise through the rankings over the past year had been one of the most dramatic and discussed stories in women's tennis. From outside the top 300 to a top 10 conversation in barely 12 months, a trajectory that demanded explanation every time someone tried to account for it. On the doubles court in Paris, none of that felt like pressure. It felt like fuel. Her returns came back with a ferocity that immediately put the experienced team on the back foot, and each one landed with the kind of confidence that comes not from recklessness, but from genuine belief.
The early break arrived, and then something shifted, not in the score, but in the atmosphere on the other side of the net. Body language in professional tennis is one of the sport's most honest communication systems. Players tried to control it, tried to maintain the flat expression and the steady walk and the composed bounce between points, but under sustained pressure from an opponent playing above expectations, the mask begins to slip. Small things first, a longer look at the strings after a missed shot, a slightly slower recovery between points, a forced shot from the backcourt when patience would have served better. None of these things appear on the scoreboard, but they are visible to everyone watching, and they tell the real story of what is happening inside a match. What was happening inside this match was becoming increasingly clear. The experienced team had arrived expecting one thing and was being given something else entirely. And for Diana Schneider specifically, the psychological dimension of this moment must have been significant. You enter the match as the decorated half of the favorite team, carrying Olympic silver earned in this very city on this very surface. You are supposed to be the one bringing composure and experience to a tight situation. Instead, you are watching two teenagers control the rhythm of the match in front of a worldwide audience, and the court is beginning to feel smaller with every game. Meanwhile, in the stands, something extraordinary was building. Witnesses inside the stadium described it in terms that went beyond ordinary match atmosphere. A passionate, organized wave of Filipino supporters had packed into the upper sections, and they had not come to sit quietly and applaud politely at the appropriate moments. They had come to be part of something. Flags were out, voices were loud. Every single time one of their players stepped up to serve, the noise level around the court spiked in a way that tournament staff reportedly took notice of. This was not the kind of crowd that gives up quietly when the match becomes difficult. This was the kind of crowd that makes the match itself more difficult for the other side. And the energy was not confined to the stadium. Back home and across the Filipino diaspora scattered across dozens of countries, the moment had already taken on a life of its own before the first set was even finished. The hashtag connecting Eala and Mboko surged into the national trending list on Philippine social media with a speed that caught even experienced observers off guard. Watch parties that had been organized in Manila with cautious optimism were suddenly overflowing, spilling into streets and sidewalks with people pressed together watching the score update in real time. Group chats from Dubai to Toronto to Los Angeles exploded with messages that mixed disbelief with pure joy. The particular combination of emotions that only arrives when something you dared to hope for actually starts happening. For the Filipino community worldwide, this was not simply a tennis match anymore. It had become something larger, something that connected people across time zones and continents and the invisible distances that diaspora life creates. A shared moment happening right now that everybody was experiencing together. If this story has a single thread that runs beneath everything, beneath the match result, beneath the crowd energy, beneath the historic nature of the moment, It is the quiet detail that very few people outside the inner circle of professional tennis had been paying close attention to. Rafael Nadal, 14 Roland Garros titles, 22 Grand Slam championships, a legacy on clay that has no equal in the history of the sport, and an understanding of the surface, its physics, its psychology, its particular demands on a player's body and mind that goes so far beyond what can be taught in a conventional coaching session that it borders on something else entirely. In recent weeks, Nadal had been working quietly behind the scenes with Alexandra Eala, offering guidance, sharing observations, passing on the accumulated knowledge of a career spent mastering the one surface where this very tournament is contested. And Eala had not treated that connection casually. Speaking during the Italian Open, she made her perspective clear in a way that revealed exactly how seriously she was taking the opportunity. She said simply that anything she could take from Rafa, she would take with pride.
That sentence deserves more attention than it initially received, because it is not the language of someone collecting a famous name for promotional purposes. It is not a casual drop into a press conference to generate a headline. It is the language of a young player who understands exactly what is being offered to her, direct access to the mind of the greatest clay court champion the sport has ever produced, and has made a genuine, deliberate decision to absorb every single lesson available. Nadal does not invest his time carelessly. He has seen too much of the sport, competed at too high a level for too long to mistake potential for genuine promise. When he looks at a young player on clay and sees something worth spending time on, that judgment carries weight that no ranking or scouting report can replicate. He had watched Eala move on the surface, watched her instincts, noted her footwork, her positioning, the way she reads a point and makes decisions under pressure, and he had seen something that told him his time was not being wasted. The results of those private sessions were beginning to show up in public matches. The composure at the net that observers noticed against Fernandez and Schneider did not appear from nowhere. The clay court intelligence that allowed Eala to stay calm and controlled in the most pressure-filled moments of the match had been sharpened somewhere, in sessions that the public never sees, with a teacher who knows exactly what excellence on this surface looks like. Zoom out from the match itself, from the scoreline and the crowd and the social media explosion, and what you are looking at is something bigger than a single upset. You are looking at the beginning of a shift. Victoria Mboko's story is already one of the most dramatic of the current WTA generation. Rising from outside the top 300 to the edge of the top 10 in less than a year is not simply a matter of playing well. It requires sustaining an extraordinary level of performance across dozens of matches in different countries and conditions against players who get progressively more dangerous as the ranking climbs. It requires managing the physical load, the travel, the pressure, and the expectation that arrives with every new benchmark achieved. And it requires doing all of this while staying mentally clear enough to keep improving, to keep identifying weaknesses and eliminating them, to keep pushing forward when every instinct says you have already achieved something remarkable and could reasonably slow down. Mboko has not slowed down, she has accelerated. And the confidence with which she delivered her Grand Slam ambitions publicly, not as a distant dream, but as an inevitability, a matter of timing rather than possibility, reveals the kind of inner certainty that cannot be manufactured or taught. It either exists in a player or it does not. In Mboko, it clearly does. Eala's development has been different in character, but equally compelling in its direction. Where Mboko's rise has been defined by speed and the sheer force of her results, Eala's has been defined by a growing clay court intelligence and a composure that looks strikingly mature for her age and experience level. She does not play like a young player finding her way. She plays like someone who has already done a considerable amount of the hardest internal work and arrived at a place of relative clarity about who she is as a competitor. Together, these two represent something that WTA has genuinely needed for some time. Not just two individual talents, two individuals who bring with them two distinct and passionate global audiences that the sport has been trying to reach for years. The Philippine fan base alone is a number that cannot be talked around anymore. More than 100 million people in the Philippines, combined with one of the largest and most geographically dispersed diaspora communities anywhere in the world, creates a potential tennis audience of extraordinary size and emotional investment. These are fans who will stay awake at impossible hours to stream a match live, who will organize watch parties at short notice, who will turn a local sports competition into a nationally unifying cultural moment with a speed and intensity that leaves tournament organizers and broadcasters scrambling to understand what they are dealing with. Add the growing Canadian swell building around Mboko, and the picture becomes even larger. 2 players, 2 communities, 1 partnership, and a global audience that the WTA is only beginning to understand it has been given the opportunity to reach. But before the celebration fully takes over the narrative, it is worth pausing on what both players endured to arrive at this breakthrough moment. Because the story of Eala and Mboko is not a story about talent being handed opportunities and cashing in on them gracefully. It is a story about how young athletes respond when things go wrong, which, in professional tennis, they go wrong constantly and without warning.
Eala walked into the doubles draw carrying a straight-set singles exit still fresh in her memory. That kind of loss has a particular texture. It is not ambiguous. There is no second set where you fought back to force a tiebreak, no dramatic third set that went the distance and could have gone either way. There is only the clean, flat clarity of having been beaten comprehensively by a better player on that day, and having to sit with that knowledge while the tournament continues around you. The way she responded, the messages she sent after the defeat, the tone and the focus they communicated, the absence of self-pity or deflection, said something important about who she is as a competitor. She did not hide from the loss. She did not look for excuses to attach to it. She processed it, moved forward, and showed up on the doubles court ready to compete. Mboko's Strasbourg heartbreak was a different kind of wound. Losing a final is not simply losing a match. It is losing a match that you had already done enough to earn the right to win. The field is down to 2 players. You have beaten everyone else, and then, at the final moment, the title slips away. For a player with Mboko's ambitions, and she has made those ambitions absolutely clear, that experience cuts deep. But here is what made the doubles performance so striking. Neither player carried any visible emotional residue from those defeats onto the court in Paris. The body language was clean, the focus was sharp, the willingness to be aggressive, to take risks, to go for shots that could just as easily become errors as winners, all of it was present and undiminished. They stepped across the net, looked at an Olympic silver medalist and a former Grand Slam finalist, and refused entirely to be intimidated. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, one of the rarest and most valuable qualities in professional sport: the ability to absorb a significant defeat and return to full competitive mode without protective hesitation and without the unconscious anchoring to past pain that derails so many talented players at critical moments. When the final point landed and the match was decided, Eala and Mboko met at the center of the court in an embrace that spoke a language older than any post-match interview could articulate. It was not the explosion of disbelief that accompanies an upset so unexpected that even the winners cannot quite believe it. It was something quieter and more significant. It was the look of 2 players who had known, somewhere beneath all the noise and the doubt and the predictions, that this was possible, who had believed it when almost nobody else did, and who were now standing in the moment they had imagined and worked toward, feeling not so much surprised as confirmed. On the other side of the net, Diana Schneider packed her bags. The Olympic silver medalist who had arrived in Paris with every credential and every expectation of advancing now faced the same exit that Eala and Mboko had just forced upon her. The Philippine flags in the crowd did not stop waving for a moment.
And the broader story of what this means for both players, for Filipino tennis, for the WTA's global evolution, for the partnerships and mentorships quietly operating behind the scenes, that story is still being written. The doubles draw at Roland Garros has been transformed by this result. Where the conversation before the match was about whether Eala and Mboko could be competitive, it has now shifted to something entirely different. The question is no longer whether they belong on a Grand Slam stage. That answer has been provided. The question now is how far they can actually go. The grass court season is approaching. Wimbledon is only weeks away. The US Open Series waits after that, and the Cinderella question that is now being asked openly, whether this partnership can push all the way into the quarterfinals, the semifinals, or further, is no longer being framed as fantasy. It is being framed as a genuine conversation that the tennis world has to take seriously because this result has earned it. For the fans who have been here from the beginning, who followed Eala through her breakthrough wins against top 10 players in Miami before the mainstream tennis press had really taken notice, who tracked Mboko's ascent through the rankings when she was still an intriguing prospect rather than a proven commodity, who watched both players absorb defeat with grace and return with something sharpened, this moment has a specific and irreplaceable quality. It does not feel like bandwagon excitement. It does not carry the slightly hollow energy of fans who discovered these players through a viral clip this morning and are now fully on board. It feels like vindication. It feels like watching a story arrive at the chapter you always knew was coming, even when the rest of the world was still on the first page. The prediction machine got it wrong. The odds got it wrong. The experts and the analysts and the careful, reasonable voices urging caution got it wrong. Not because they were incompetent or uninformed, but because the things they measured, rankings, experience, past results, head-to-head records at this level, simply could not account for the things that matter most in a moment like this. The friendship forged across years, the belief that does not waver when the conditions say it should, the lessons absorbed from a clay court master in sessions that nobody filmed, the courage to compete without protection when the stage is as big as it gets. Those things do not appear in data. They appear in moments exactly like the one that just unfolded in Paris. Alexandra Eala and Victoria Mboko did not simply win a doubles match at Roland Garros. They announced something to the entire sport, clearly, unmistakably, on one of its grandest stages. The next generation is not waiting for permission. It is not waiting for the right moment or the right draw or the right conditions. It is here, right now, playing without fear, and the rest of the tennis world is finally beginning to understand what that means. The next chapter of this story is being written one court at a time, and based on what was just witnessed in Paris, it is going to be one worth following very closely.